I'd like a loaf of bread.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Asked Mrs. Crumb, pretending not to hear.
I'd like a loaf of bread.
Mr. Noisy shouted. Oh, I'm sorry, said Mrs. Crumb, putting her hand to her ear. Could you speak up a bit, please?
I'd like a loaf of bread,
roared Mr. Noisy. I can't hear you, replied Mrs. Crumb. Mr. Noisy gave up and went out. Mr. Noisy went into Mr. Bacon's shop.
I'd like a piece of meat.
Boom. Mr. Bacon pretended not to notice.
I'd like a piece of meat.
Mr. Noisy shouted. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon.
I said I'd like a piece of meat,
roared Mr. Noisy. Beg your pardon, said Mr. Bacon. Mr. Noisy gave up and went out and went home and went to bed. Hungry. The day after, Mr. Noisy tried again. He went into Mrs. Crumb's shop.
I'd like a loaf of bread.
Boom. A what? Asked Mrs. Crumb. Mr. Noisy started shouting at the very top of his voice.
A loaf of...
Then he stopped. Then he thought. And then he said quietly,
If I were you, I'd get in that fucking car and I'd get out of here, man. And I'd gather them goonies and get whatever you've got and come at me. Because I'm gonna fucking hit you all.
Mrs. Crumb smiled. Certainly, she said. Then Mr. Noisy went into Mr. Bacon's shop.
I'd like a piece of meat.
He boomed. Did you say something? Asked Mr. Bacon.
Yes, I did,
shouted Mr. Noisy at the very, very top of his voice.
I said I'd like a...
Then he stopped. And then he thought. And then he said quietly,
I watched over you when you were asleep. And I looked at your fucking neck. And I was that far away from slicing it. You're fucking there, mate. So get in that car and fuck off.
Mr. Bacon smiled. My pleasure, he said.